Well, we are now 1 year out to the World Cup. And you know what? There are questions about the impact President Trump's travel ban could have on athletes and fans trying to get into this country.
It was supposed to be America's moment. A once-in-a-generation spectacle, the 2026 FIFA World Cup, with U.S. cities packed, stadiums roaring, and billions in tourism dollars flowing in. But behind closed doors, FIFA officials are quietly drafting a Plan B, and it doesn't end with red, white, and blue confetti. The reason? Washington's own policies, a $250 visa integrity fee, a sweeping travel ban on 12 nations including qualified Team Iran, and trade tariffs that have choked supply chains. These aren't just headlines, they're triggers. Under FIFA's 90-day reassignment rule, matches could be moved to Canada and Mexico before a single whistle blows. Billions in revenue, global prestige, and America's hosting rights, all slipping away. And if you think this is just about soccer, think again. Like and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because this story is only getting started. FIFA's contingency planning didn't just appear out of nowhere. It began quietly, almost innocuously, after the U.S. State Department confirmed the implementation of the $250 visa integrity fee, a charge applied to all incoming World Cup attendees from dozens of countries. What seemed like a bureaucratic measure quickly snowballed into an international headache. Fans from Africa, the Middle East, and parts of Asia voiced outrage. Social media was flooded with hashtags accusing the U.S. of weaponizing visas against sports. Then came the travel bans. 12 countries, including Iran, a qualified team, saw their players, staff, and supporters suddenly facing blocked entry. The move was pitched domestically as a matter of national security, but to FIFA, it was a logistical nightmare. A World Cup without qualified nations is not just unfair, it's a direct breach of the tournament's inclusive spirit. That's when the 90-day rule came into play. FIFA maintains a little-known clause that allows them to reassign hosting duties for matches if a host city or country is unable to meet participation requirements. With bans and visa delays stacking up, the possibility wasn't hypothetical anymore. It was on the table. But the visa situation was only half the storm.
2026 World Cup only a year out, there's a big question of whether the fans will make it to the stadiums or be forced to watch from home. Set in the United States, Canada, and Mexico across 16 different cities, some thousands of miles apart, it's already presenting logistical challenges.
In the background, tariffs, part of Washington's broader trade war policies, were causing unexpected chaos. Stadium construction projects in cities like Kansas City and Philadelphia were suddenly short on Canadian steel beams, LED scoreboard panels from South Korea, and even basic seating shipments from Europe. Supply chains that had been tight since the pandemic were now suffocating under tariff surcharges and customs delays. For stadium managers, this meant one thing: deadlines in jeopardy. And in FIFA's world, missed construction deadlines aren't forgiven, they're reassigned. Canadian and Mexican venues, meanwhile, faced no such bottlenecks. BC Place in Vancouver and Estadio Azteca in Mexico City were already match-ready, with minor upgrades scheduled to finish months ahead of kickoff. Then came the corporate wake-up call. Emirates Airlines, a longtime FIFA sponsor, announced a $15 million sponsorship reallocation from U.S.-hosted matches to Canadian venues. Officially, they cited logistical certainty and audience accessibility, but behind the scenes, sources pointed to U.S. visa restrictions as the deal-breaker. If fans can't fly in without months of paperwork, why invest in those matches at all? Visa, another global sponsor, wasn't far behind. While they didn't pull out entirely, insiders revealed the company had frozen additional U.S. venue promotions until clarity on fan access was resolved. In corporate speak, that's a warning shot. Meanwhile, host cities in the U.S. began to crunch the numbers and panic. The projections were brutal: billions in lost tourism revenue, tens of thousands of hotel bookings evaporated, restaurants losing peak season traffic, and entire seasonal job markets disappearing overnight. This wasn't just about prestige. It was about local economies that had already budgeted around the World Cup windfall.
Trump administration's crackdown on immigration and fans are increasingly concerned.
The fan impact was just as severe. For supporters from banned nations or those caught in the 300-plus day visa interview backlog, the dream of attending the tournament in America was evaporating. Even for those approved, the extra $250 fee felt like a gouge. Fans spoke of skipping the US entirely and heading to Canada or Mexico instead, places where entry was simpler, faster, and far cheaper. Canada, in particular, began to sense an opportunity. Ottawa fast-tracked talks with FIFA to expand its match schedule, touting streamlined entry policies and visa-free access for dozens of nations. They pointed to modern, already approved venues like BC Place and BMO Field, paired with world-class public transit and hotel infrastructure. The message was subtle but clear: we're ready, and we're open for business. Mexico also moved quickly. Drawing on its hosting experience from 1970 and 1986, it emphasized the readiness of iconic venues like Estadio Azteca and Monterrey's Estadio BBVA. With no major entry restrictions for Latin American fans, Mexico positioned itself as the cultural and logistical alternative to a U.S. mired in political red tape. What truly alarmed U.S. officials was how coordinated Canada and Mexico's approaches seemed. Both nations were quietly in contact with corporate sponsors, broadcasters, and even tourism boards to secure contingency agreements. If FIFA flipped the switch, they could scale up instantly. And FIFA's own internal documents, leaked by a whistleblower, showed that the governing body wasn't just considering partial match shifts. Entire knockout rounds, including quarterfinals and semifinals, were being mapped for relocation scenarios. These plans included pre-booked hotel blocks in Vancouver and Mexico City, as well as reserved charter flights for teams and officials. The momentum was shifting. What had started as quiet contingency planning was now an open question among sports journalists. Would the U.S. lose not just a few games, but the heart of the tournament? But the stakes went beyond soccer. For Washington, the World Cup was supposed to be a soft power showcase, a chance to reaffirm America's role as a global convener. Losing matches to Canada and Mexico wouldn't just hurt financially. It would signal a broader decline in U.S. influence. And as the summer of 2025 ticked on, the warning signs multiplied. More sponsors hinted at reallocating funds. Stadium contractors issued revised completion dates, some months late. Visa processing centers saw no meaningful reduction in delays. Every metric that mattered to FIFA was trending in the wrong direction. But that wasn't the whole story, because what Canada did next would make the U.S. situation even worse. Canada's next move was nothing short of a diplomatic power play. While U.S. officials were still insisting the visa and tariff policies were non-negotiable, Ottawa launched what insiders called the World Cup Acceleration Initiative. It wasn't just about being ready if FIFA called, it was about making FIFA want to call. First, Canada announced a streamlined World Cup entry pass, an expedited visa waiver for fans, journalists, and accredited vendors from more than 80 countries. Applications were processed in days, not months. The messaging was deliberate. No red tape, no $250 surcharge, no exclusion zones. Canadian embassies and consulates worldwide pushed the program hard, directly targeting fans frustrated by U.S. bureaucracy. Then came the infrastructure blitz. Vancouver's BC Place began fast-tracking additional seating expansions. Toronto's BMO Field secured new corporate boxes, and Montreal's Olympic Stadium quietly entered upgrade talks despite not being an official venue. Behind the scenes, Canadian tourism boards were bundling travel packages with Air Canada, WestJet, and even Emirates, the very airline that had just redirected millions away from U.S. matches. Mexico wasn't idle either. The Mexican Football Federation announced a joint partnership with LATAM Airlines to guarantee discounted travel for fans from South America and the Caribbean. Estadio Azteca began a major lighting and broadcast technology overhaul, designed to meet FIFA's latest TV requirements well ahead of schedule. Monterrey and Guadalajara marketed themselves as the fan energy capitals, promising open-air viewing plazas and cultural festivals to draw visitors even if they couldn't get match tickets. FIFA's senior logistics team started making more frequent visits to Canadian and Mexican cities. Publicly, they said it was standard evaluation. Privately, multiple sources confirmed they were conducting full operational readiness assessments, something usually reserved for final-stage host confirmations. In some cases, FIFA officials arrived in U.S. cities the same week they visited Canadian and Mexican counterparts, directly comparing progress and compliance. In Washington, alarm bells finally started ringing. Host city mayors demanded emergency meetings with federal officials, warning that tourism and hospitality sectors were preparing for catastrophic losses. Hoteliers in New York and Los Angeles reported corporate block bookings being canceled or shifted to Vancouver and Mexico City. The ripple effects were already happening, and FIFA hadn't even made its decision yet. The numbers painted a grim picture. An internal report from the U.S. Travel Association estimated that losing just 10 group stage matches to Canada or Mexico could cost the U.S. economy upwards of $1.4 billion in lost tourism revenue. That number skyrocketed to $3.8 billion if knockout rounds moved. Local businesses, from catering companies to merchandise vendors, faced layoffs before the first ticket was even sold. But it wasn't only about money. The World Cup is as much about image as it is about goals and trophies. Canada and Mexico were now being seen as the open, welcoming hosts, a contrast to the U.S., portrayed internationally as bureaucratic, restrictive, and politically rigid. Sports journalists in Europe and Asia began running op-eds suggesting the North American World Cup was no longer a truly shared event, but one that might be defined by U.S. absence in key matches. Sponsors noticed the narrative shift. Coca-Cola and Adidas reportedly began exploring contingency marketing plans featuring Canadian and Mexican backdrops more prominently. Broadcasters quietly discussed production cost savings if they focused coverage in 2 countries instead of 3. The situation escalated further when FIFA's internal Plan Delta leaked to the press. The document outlined a relocation schedule that could be activated 12 months before the tournament, moving up to 20 matches, including high-profile games, to Canada and Mexico. Notably, the plan included U.S. matches already sold to fans, meaning refunds, rebookings, and public relations chaos. Instead of easing tensions, Washington doubled down. Officials defended the visa fee as a necessary security measure and insisted the travel bans were non-negotiable. This stubbornness only fueled speculation that FIFA might act sooner rather than later. In Canada, the tone was the opposite, calm, confident, and quietly assertive. Tourism Minister Soraya Martinez Ferrada publicly stated, "If FIFA requires us to take on more matches, Canada will deliver without hesitation." In Mexico, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador echoed a similar sentiment, framing it as a chance to show the warmth and energy of Latin America to the world. Canada and Mexico aren't just ready. They're waiting, prepared to seize the spotlight the moment FIFA gives the word. If this happens, it won't just be a sports story. It will be a warning that America's greatest threat to influence isn't foreign rivals, but its own refusal to adapt. If you think this matters, make sure you're subscribed, hit the like button, and keep watching, because the next move could change the World Cup forever.